paperwork.
Or is it health and well-being?
I think it's usually two. All we have to do is open cake.
What? So it's like they are.
It's true.
No. No.
I don't know.
Here you go, Joanne.
Yes, I would say that. I don't know what that meant, but if they
No, you didn't.
Joan. Okay. I'm trying to. So Joe.
Look, Steve trained me well.
This one, no, it's this one right here. Health and well-being, where'd it go? The health and well-being of students is the district's priority, or are those two now? I mean, two subjects, or is it one collective? It's not students, because that's a prepositional phrase.
It's not students, because that's it.
Yeah. What kind of prepositional phrase? Adjective.
I could say the health and well-being of students are the district's highest
Yeah.
priority.
Priorities.
Change verb.
You've got to change your
Your predicate.
pretty adjective. That's a high feeling. That's all right. I just go to stick a they in there to say they are district's high
No idea.
priorities.
It's much better when you have no idea.
I liked it. I just thought I'd ask, but yeah, I'll play that.
All right. I'm gonna do mine.
Rather than science
we have a,
elementary.
we have a,
Because it sounds so much better.
It brought shame upon your family.
they also have you the certificate
Wow.
All right, at this time, I call this meeting of the Monomoy Regional School Committee to order at 6:33. And the first item of business is the approval of the meeting minutes. Are there any corrections?
I move to approve the minutes from January 24th.
I would second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next on the agenda is public comment. Is anyone from the audience would like to speak for a 5-minute time? Okay, with that, I close the public comment. Recognitions?
Yes, I'd like to thank the Yartlitz family for their donation of a keyboard to the middle school music program. Thanks to the Friends of Trees for their grant in the amount of $2,000 to help support the grade 6 Finest Hours field trip. To the Artist Charity for their grant of $1,500 to cover bus transportation to and from Logan Airport for Miss Barnes' Iceland field trip trip over April break. And then thanks to the Cape Cod 5 for their generous donation of mini grants. They will be providing $500 to the following teachers for Nancy Capon and Beth Connors at Harwich Elementary to promote cultural responsive literature to enhance all students' academic and social learning. To Jeremiah Nickerson at the middle school for his Empty Bowls, Full Hearts donation-based fundraiser for Monomoy Market, the school's food pantry. And to Elizabeth Bourget and Jesse Malloy at the middle school for their project Expedition WITA, a cross-curricular unit exposing students to a variety of WITA-related activities.
Okay. Continuing, Dr. Carpenter, with the superintendent's certificate award.
Sure. This, for me, is probably my favorite part of each year, where we have some really great good news at a school committee meeting. And every year, the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents allows superintendents to award, based on the enrollment in their district, 1 or 2 awards. And given that we are a relatively small district, it's 1 award. But there's criteria that they have. The student needs to be really at the top end of their class, that top 10%. They've got to be somebody who's a leader in the school, that's involved in the community. And every year I have our crack team of counselors and high school administrators discuss all the students at that, the top, our top seniors. And each year we, as a group, come up with our award winner. This year, I'd like to sort of maybe welcome Perry Como, who will be this year's award winner. Perry, why don't you just come up here, and I'll proceed to hopefully embarrass you in front of your family and everyone out there on television, just to go and talk for a moment about what Perry's accomplished here. According to our high school staff, Perry Como possesses one of the most brilliant mathematical minds to pass through our doors. Perry's record of academic success is flawless and demonstrates continuous growth and perseverance during his 4 years at Monomoy Regional High School. He's consistently amassed outstanding accomplishments that set him far apart from his peers, and he has demonstrated an aptitude far beyond most high school students. Perry demonstrates an intellectual capacity to acquire information at a supremely rapid pace. His ability to utilize reasoning skills and comprehend the most abstract concepts down to the smallest details truly place him in a world of learning all of his own. Perry's transcript is immaculate, as he has taken every AP course available to him and never received a grade below an A. When it was determined that AP Physics wouldn't fit into his schedule, he found a way to free up a block in his schedule senior year by taking a dual enrollment course at Cape Cod Community College in English composition over 6 weeks, and knock that out so that he could go and take more sciences. Perry will represent our seniors as the 2019 valedictorian. His superior SAT scores with a perfect math score of 800, along with AP scores, perfect MCAS scores, and impeccable transcript are all reflective of his intellectual ability. He's acknowledged as a commended student in the 2018 National Merit Scholarship Program. He has a passionate interest in biomedical engineering and envisions himself developing medical breakthroughs that will impact our world. Perry's an avid athlete. He's lettered in 2 varsity sports that have led to his captaincy in both. He's a member of the school's chapter of the Key Club, where he holds the position of president. He annually attends the Decon Conference. Perry's a member of the school's National Honor Society and has been selected to attend a multitude of leadership conferences throughout the state. Perry was the recipient of the Harvard Book Award, has been nominated by the entire faculty to receive math, science, English, and history departmental awards, which is a testament to his tremendous promise across the academic domains. He's a peer tutor and is consistently giving up his own time to assist classmates and peers who need additional support in their classes. Perry's a kind nature and a deep connection to family. He thrives with strong sibling bonds between he and his sister and brother, always reflects on them as he talks about his long-term plans. His mom describes him as uniquely independent and someone with tremendous maturity and resiliency. Perry is unequivocally one of the most outstanding students in our senior class, whose commitment to achieving the highest academic standards and remarkable work ethic allow him to balance a tremendous, enormous demands that pull him in conflicting directions. So Perry, congratulations. And it's been nice as a superintendent now in my 10th year to sort of reflect back each year on the superintendent award winners that I have given this to and where those individuals have launched to. So you're in some really great company. And we will also be inviting you and celebrating you and all of the other superintendent award winners on this area of the Cape at a dinner at Cape Tech. So let me present this to you, and thank you very much. anything after that is just sort of like,
Right?
Yeah. Let's go home.
Yes.
much deserved.
Very impressive.
Next on the agenda.
It's not gonna be nearly as fun.
Approval for the 2-year extension of the Open Cape contract, fiscal 20 and 21.
Katie Isernio, business manager, I don't know how you follow that. I leaned into Corey and said maybe we should give Perry our budget and have him look over it. As you recall, we went out to bid 3 years ago for our internet services, and we moved away from Comcast and awarded a contract to Open Cape. And at the time, we also had an option for 2 one-year renewals, and the pricing if we needed more services, 1 gigabyte. And that's, we're gonna expand the services, and what I'm looking for is approval of the 2 one-year options that we went out to bid for originally when we went for the contract. They do, the Open Cape is our internet provider.
Could I have a motion or, sorry. Nancy?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2 one-year contract extensions for Open Cape, the provider for internet services as referenced in the contract signed on May 26, 2016. The new contract will provide an increase in services to 1 gigabyte at $4,500 per month. Contract to run through June 30th of 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
And, okay, next will be the draft budget for fiscal 20.
Yeah, I would encourage Perry and his family to escape while they can before they're lulled to sleep.
Oh, aren't there policies coming up next?
Before Superintendent Carpenter gets started on the presentation, I just wanted to let everybody know that all of this information will be posted tomorrow on the website. The previous versions of the budget we've talked about thus far are on the website. And we've also added some budget understanding the budget and a couple of videos that the Mass Association of Regional School Districts has put out on understanding funding and spending. And there's a lot of all of the PowerPoints for the past few years are up on the website, so I think that you'll find a lot of useful information that we just reorganized a little bit. It's always been there, but we just brought it to the forefront, okay? Under the finance section on the website.
So before I get into the budget presentation itself, I'd like to, we'll do a little non sequitur narrative to sort of preface it. I was having some conversations with somebody I called up last night to talk about a piece that's in the budget, and was just reflecting with them. I said as a superintendent, you have these challenges, and I think one of them, when it comes to a budget presentation, is everybody wants the school district to improve. They want to see the curriculum instruction, move forward and improve. But people generally don't want to see things change, and you have this, these wants for improvement, but these wants to see things not change, and so you find yourself in this stuck in the middle at times. And at the same point, I think, in many ways, people want to make sure, from the taxpayer standpoint, that as superintendent, I'm being mindful of the bottom line. And at the same time, I think there are others that want to make sure that I'm not reducing staff, and I'm not, because it's people's livelihoods. And behind this budget, as I get into it, this is a budget that does have some staff reductions. But it's also a budget that we were very mindful in putting it together, that we offer the same strong program that Monomoy's had, because we've seen over the years here. I think a much stronger educational program over the last handful of years. And there's some really good news when we look at this budget presentation. There's a slide that I'll show where we have, if we look at our school choice families that are looking to come to Monomoy, that number's going up. If we look at school choice out, that number's going down. If we look at the number of kids heading to charter school, that number's going down. But we also have one other reality that's behind this. The total number of children that are school-aged in our two towns is also in decline. And so we did some soul searching on my end. We have 58 fewer children that we're expecting next year than what we had 3 years ago. And so we were thoughtfully thinking about how do we go and contract where it makes sense and put together this. So keep that in mind when we're going through this. So first, we decided to just move this up to the front, but we have tonight's presentation for the budget. Will be at the Harwich Select Board on Monday, February 4th. We have invited people to a community forum at the Harwich Community Center on Tuesday night. There's a reason why I wanted to do an outreach and do a presentation, or at least be available for questioning, not in the school buildings, because no offense to folks, I see a lot of the same faces sometimes at our school committee meetings, and I just want to see if we can reach out and meet people where we're not seeing them, and hopefully get a chance for people who might not come into our schools to ask questions and to get information about the school system and budget if they want. On February 11th, we will be before the Chatham Board of Selectmen. The following night, February 12th, we have the annual budget forum or budget public hearing, which I admit will largely be a repeat of tonight, but that's I don't see the numbers changing, but that's annually what we do. The following school committee meeting is March 14th, and that's when the school committee would vote the budget by line item, and then as we progress into May, we have the two town meetings. So there are things that meetings that we'll be having, and there's lots of opportunity for different folks in the public to chime in on the budget too. So just the 30-foot view of our budget. I have mentioned to folks that that there is a significant, unpredictable, unavoidable out-of-district driver behind this budget that causes this budget to be a 3.0% increase on the budget side. If we weren't having that out-of-district expenses, it's a 1.96% increase in the budget. It's a reduced staff budget without a reduction in services or programs. Health insurance and the bus transportation and our contract negotiations are helping bring this in at the 1.96% increase, excluding the out-of-districts. And there is a decline in the number of children in Chatham, particularly relative to Harwich, and in the foundation enrollment for this year, there is a significant increase in the number of children in Harwich, and it's causing, as we get into the assessment component of this budget conversation, it causes a rather significant swing towards Harwich, and we can kind of get into how that minimum required contribution plays into all of this a little later. So one of the things that's behind a budget is we have the Chapter 70 state aid that comes in. So we just provide a little slide for folks that want information on the statutory funding. But basically, the state requires that the towns come up with a minimum amount of money to support the education of their students. And that amount is based on the number of students that are in that town heading to public schools, but it also includes the wealth factors in that community related to property values and related to personal income wealth. Combined, the state goes and takes that minimum required contribution and adds an extra amount of money, this Chapter 70 state aid. So that's one of the factors that comes into the budget. State aid has been increasing over the last several years, and there was a push this year on Beacon Hill to see more state funding. So if you look at the orange line there, you'll notice that state funding did increase, and it didn't increase, at least at Monomoy, as much as it did in some other communities where I would say the wealth factors are not as strong. So, so there was an increase in state aid, but there were some communities that you might read about that had rather significant increases. The required minimum contributions, as I mentioned, there's a swing in this, and we get into how much further down in the presentation, but you'll notice that Harwich's minimum contribution has been slowly ticking up rather quickly in the last couple years. Chatham's has been slowly ticking down. That's largely driven by the total number of children attending Monomoy from both communities. We have, when we calculate an assessment, something is called, in our regional agreement, we use a 3-year rolling average of foundation enrollment. Foundation enrollment's different than the enrollment in our schools. So foundation enrollment would be all the children, let's say, living in Harwich, who attend Monomoy, who attend Nauset or DY through school choice, who attend Lighthouse Charter or Sturgis, because all of those children that would attend those different school districts, we're financially responsible for. So the school districts, those children are included in what's called a foundation enrollment, because the funding for all of those different placements of kids comes out of the school district's budget. By having a 3-year rolling average, the enrollment factor gets smoothed year to year. So so keep that in mind, that there's a smoothing because of the 3-year rolling average. At present, in the FY20 budget, the enrollment split between Chatham and Harwich is 73.45 Harwich, 26.55 Chatham, and and I know when I first came here 6 years ago, people were like, oh, that Chatham number's tracking down quickly to 0, and the Harwich number's tracking quickly up to 100%. And the reality is it's been a slow, gradual trend. There are some years it's slightly increased towards Chatham, but in general, the enrollment in Chatham has been dropping off a little bit faster than enrollments in Harwich. But there's a reality that the Cape, in this area, the Cape in particular, is facing. We're seeing fewer and fewer school-aged children just in our communities. There's fewer births, so that just the total number of children that could be in our schools is slowly going down. So we included this slide. The bars there would be the foundation enrollment that's used behind the minimum required contribution calculation. And you'll notice that doesn't have this sort of smooth progression year to year. It spikes up 40 kids one year, down 30 kids the next year. And we see that sort of up and down in the foundation enrollment for Chatham. We also see the up and down in Harwich. You can imagine that in FY14, that dip would have swung foundation enrollments, heading over towards, or it would have swung the minimum required contribution some towards Chatham. So so when you see these up and downs, it will cause these shifts in minimum required contribution, and the state, when they calculate the minimum required contribution, doesn't have a mechanism for a 3-year smoothing of, of that. All right, guidelines that we used in developing the budget. One of the major things that that we were thinking about as we were putting this budget together is our new strategic plan. We talked a lot earlier in this school year about the creation of the strategic plan. We brought it here before the school committee, but we are really looking at how we can expand community engagement and partnerships. That was one of the key strategic initiatives. Strengthen social and emotional well-being, closing the achievement gap, and improving curriculum instruction and assessment for all learners. Ever since I've been here, I have stressed that we strive to have class sizes at our elementary schools 18 plus or minus 1, and we strive at our middle and high school to have the maximum class sizes 19 plus or minus 2. Now, given there may be some some classes that are going to be a little bit higher at the high school and some a little bit lower, or there may be some cohorts at the elementary level that might tick up to over 20 or 21. But there are others that are down around 14, 15 at times. So so that has been, it goes up and down. And then one of the important things is we want to make sure that this budget that we're putting forward fits within the fiscal wherewithal of both towns. Katie Isernial, our business manager, and I spend a lot of time talking with town managers in both Chatham and Harwich and their finance directors to make sure that that we're putting forth an educational program that makes sense for the district, but also trying to make sure that that this is fitting within the fiscal ability of our two towns. As I said, this is a reduced staff budget, but I also want to say it's a level services budget, so we have. We have seen a 58 student decline since FY16, and we've really looked at this and said, okay, where appropriate, let's reduce some of the staffing to mirror the enrollment decline without impacting our educational program. There is built into this budget. We have reached an understanding with both our Unit A and Unit B's, that would be the teachers, teaching assistants, and our clerical staff. There's still a ratification vote to have all of that be sort of finalized public, and we can share what those agreements are. But we've built into that at least the financial agreements that we've reached with our bargaining groups. We have in this budget's built on the governor's numbers that were released on January 23rd. We have the minimum required contributions that were released at that same date, the 3-year rolling average, as I mentioned. And we also have a commitment to funding our outstanding unemployment benefits, or OPEB, we've been consistently trying to set aside $100,000 each year towards funding OPEB. So some factors just behind our budget. If we look at district enrollment, again, different than foundation enrollment, because this is the kids that are actually sitting in the seats in our classrooms. We are 65% Harwich, 22% Chatham, and 13% school choice. And the school choice students that are coming here come with them bringing tuition dollars from their school districts the towns that they live in. If we look at our district enrollment over the past years, we have seen a slight decline in district enrollment, and we anticipate next year the enrollment's going to be slightly down off of that FY19 number. So we're hovering right around 1,900 students. When back in FY16 we were just over 1,960 students. So so as I said, we've seen a decline in students, and we've been thoughtfully looking at where can we, potentially make some staff reductions without impacting the program. Staff comparisons. Each year, Katie and I put together a slide just sort of listing, here's how many staff we have across different levels. You look up there and how many school building administrators, principals and assistant principals, how many teachers, how many nurses, how many instructional assistants do we have. So, so you'll notice that there's a slight decline in the instructional assistants in this budget, slight decline in the number of teachers in this budget, slight decline in the number of network technicians, and in the administrative assistants. So we go from a staff of 339.7 FTEs to an anticipated staff of 331.2. What we see as anticipated class sizes here, if we were to reduce sections at Chatham Elementary, at the moment, Chatham Elementary, we have been reducing over the past 2 budget cycles 1 teacher each year. So we have been reducing kindergarten down to 2 sections, first grade down to 2 sections, and next year going to second grade down to 2 sections. It's just based on the number of children that are currently coming in each year to Chatham Elementary School. We haven't had enough students to merit having that 3rd classroom open. We do at Harwich Elementary School. We're starting to see that same challenge this year. When we started, we were looking at the kindergarten enrollments, thinking, should we keep a 6th kindergarten class open, or should we contract by 1? And we really feel that as the kindergartners head into 1st grade, that we can go and accommodate that contraction from 6 kindergarten sections to 5 first grade sections. What we'll see the class sizes at kindergarten and 1st grade at 18, 2nd grade at 18 at Harwich Elementary, 3rd grade at 16. The challenge becomes how to manage 4th grade. Harwich Elementary traditionally has had 5 sections in fourth grade. 5 sections at 4th grade would be class size 20.5 next year. And so we were looking at, do we contract at Chatham Elementary to try to balance out and provide equity between the 2 buildings? In my ideal world, if we had 2 additional staff to throw at a budget, in my ideal world, I would add 2 4th grade teachers. And I think some of the other realities we face is if I was to tell most elementary schools off Cape that there's class sizes of 21 and 20.5 at 4th grade, they're pretty small. It's all sort of relative to where you are and what you've experienced. But I also behind that cohort, the current cohort that's in 4th grade, you can see smaller, there's smaller numbers that will kind of continue on. So I anticipate that that Harwich Elementary will continue to shrink slowly down to 5 sections per grade level. And Chatham Elementary, unless we see a lot more families moving into Chatham, or a lot more babies being born, we're going to be at this. I would say, yes. When I started here, we had in some cases 9 sections per grade level, and that 9 has kind of gradually shrunk to 8 sections per grade level, and that 8 sections is sort of shrinking to 7. I think some of the good news is, if you look at some of the demographic trends, I think that shrinking of the school-age population is starting to ebb, and there are some good news things, although it's sort of a mixed blessing. Harwich this year, if you look at the foundation enrollment that's driving, or that is a driver behind this, there's a significant bump in the number of children this year that are attending public schools in Harwich compared to previous years. So there are some signs that that there are young families that are choosing our two towns. At the middle school, class sizes in the 16, 17, 18 range. High school, we imagine that the 8th grade classes are going to be roughly 16 students, and the high school classes, generally most of them in that 15 to 18 range. There will be some class sizes that are going to be bigger than that 18. We have that this year. So you'll find one teacher might have a very small, one small class and another very large class, but we'd see most of them in that 15 to 18 range. But as I said, it's all relative, but the class sizes that we're blessed with here at Monomoy are quite small and quite supportive. I mentioned special education out-of-district students. The number has gone up and down over the years, but it's a small number to begin with. When I was off Cape, we had well over 60 students that were out of district. Here, we've had a high of 19, low of 11. Next year, we anticipate that that we'll be looking at 13 students that are out of district students. I want to emphasize one thing: out of district is not that they're at Nauset or DY. These are students with some children with some profound special needs that need a placement that we can't provide in our building to give them the best possible services that they deserve. So I think one of the things we can be very proud of is just the programs, the special education programs that we do have in our schools, and we have so many kids that we can service, and we do service here. But for some children, an out-of-district placement is the right thing for them. This is what I had mentioned before. I mean, this is great news and an example of what Monomoy is doing right. Our choice in, families want to be here. Fewer families are heading out, both to other school districts and to charter schools, which then, fewer heading out, good for our budget. School choice students coming in helps our budget too. Budget offsets and expenses. On the town side, town government has something that's called free cash that is sort of a reserve that the towns can use to smooth out budget challenges one year to the other. In a regional school district, it's called excess and deficiency. And the challenge we had when we first started Monomoy, not very many years ago, is it's a new regional school district. Our reserves were zero. And Kate Cernio and I had really sort of strategized with the school committee to say, look, we want to thoughtfully make sure that we're slowly, gradually growing our reserves to help smooth out budgets one year to another for the towns. So we have gone from zero to an FY19. We had $1.5 million in that excess and deficiency. And when we were developing the FY19 budget, we used $705,000 of excess and deficiency to help smooth out last year's budget, or to smooth out the assessments to the town, the assessment being the bills that the towns get. The challenge is if you use $705,000 year after year after year, the reserve that you've created just gets depleted to the point that it's zero, and then the towns are facing a challenge where you've been offsetting your budget by $705,000 and it's suddenly not there, and then they're having to go make up for that loss. So we're sort of paring back the amount of excess and deficiency used as we put together this budget, So there's $550,000 used to help, offset the cost of the budget. But again, it's less than the previous year, which is one of the reasons that would drive and cause the assessments to go up slightly above what the overall budget increase is. School choice, this looks at school choice for the students that are coming into our school district. So we use school choice money to help offset the cost of our salary line in the budget. So we have a balance in that account. We project we will have a balance in that account at the end of this year of $484,000. Circuit breaker is money that comes in each year for expensive out-of-district tuitions. So the state funds the first $30-some thousand of those tuitions, and then reimburses school districts roughly 70% for the costs above that $30-some thousand threshold. So each year you're getting, for each one of those out-of-district students that have relatively expensive tuitions, you're getting back some money to help defray the cost of it. And the state has set this up to really look at it and say that from a state level, we're there sharing some of the burden of the costs that supporting these children is a statewide obligation, not just a local obligation. So that account we use, we are using out of that account an amount of money equivalent to what we anticipate going in. That'll still leave us with some reserve in that can help smooth out costs in the future too. And then we have the tuitions out. So these are the kids that are leaving us for Lighthouse Charter or Sturgis being the charter schools. When a student leaves us and heads out to a charter school, they take with them the full per pupil cost. So so with them is flowing out over $15,000 from out of our budget to fund them at a charter school. When a student goes to a school choice tuition or a school choice placement, like if they're heading to Nauset or if they're heading to DY, what comes out of our budget's roughly about a third of that amount. So the state back in the 90s set an amount at $5,000, and it's held since. So so you see $5,000 flow out of your budget if a student's choicing out. You see $5,000 flow in. So we if you look at this, we're seeing less money flowing out of our budget because we've got fewer kids heading out to charter schools and heading out to other school districts. So that's gone from $2.5 million to $2.4 million. But it's but more kids that we're keeping here, the more money that's staying home to help educate everybody. All right, budget drivers over for the FY20 budget over the FY19. In terms of sort of big things that show up in here, we have contractual obligations to our staff for the agreed upon COLA and what would ideally be ratified here in the next couple of weeks by our unions. There's steps, so there's steps and lanes and COLA that that are included in that. We anticipate that to be about $369,000. There are a few new out-of-district students have expensive placements. That one line item increases by $432,000. Health insurance this year was sort of the blessing. In past years, we've seen health insurance increases going up in 8-10%. This year for our actives, it was 0, and that's one of the things that's really helped bring the budget in at the low percent increase that it is. Our retirees, it's about 3.7% increase, so that health insurance line's only going up by $35,000 compared to hundreds of $1,000s in past years. We do, because it's a reduced staff budget, we have to allocate money for unemployment insurance. So we see a line in the budget that goes up this year, because there is reduced staffing, and we have to at least put a placeholder in there. What if we're having to pay for unemployment? Barnstable County retirement's going up by $77,000. There's a Essential Schools Health Grant that has been slowly going down in the district to keep that staffing, would need to absorb the $37,000 that was remained on that grant. When last we went out for a new transportation contract, the increase in that new contract was a 13% increase. We're quite confident that through transportation with the Cape Cod Collaborative, that we're going to see that transportation contract come in at 10% or less. So the 157,000 there is a placeholder for 10%. We're still in the working out the logistics phase with the collaborative. That number could come in 9%, 8%, but it's less than if we had a new contract that was 13 or above percent. So and last, we're in we have a part in this budget where the final financing of the high school construction project happened. So we had issued a 3-year State House note, and there's the $56,000 in there for that State House note. So there's some unique things that show up in this budget relative to FY19. And then we have some strategic initiatives that are continuing. If we look at the strategic plan, one of the first pieces of that strategic plan, the first strategic initiative, was all about increasing community engagement. And one of the things that we had done last year as part of our budget presentation to the school committee and both select boards is talk about allocating $20,000 to enhance community engagement in the school district. And we had at the time been contracting with Joy Jordan, who had helped us really develop the website that we currently have, and handle all of the communication aspects that are coming out of that, and updating it, training staff on that. So we had been working with Joy as a contract person for a while. We had coupled to that $20,000 in additional funding to woo her here to work with us full time as a community engagement coordinator, where she's still doing all of the back-end stuff on the website and communications, but she's also doing a wealth of other things to connect our communities to our schools. And I think, given the demographics of our community, having a community engagement coordinator is huge. I mean, we live in 2 towns where the majority of households don't have school-age children, and to have that outreach, to have people understand that the schools are yours too, and what do we have to offer is important. And the other thing that Joy is doing a fabulous job on this year is really tapping into this wonderful potential that we have, particularly in our retiree population, where we have so many people who can come in and connect with kids and mentor. She's launched a Lighthouse Leader mentoring program that's starting to pair adults in our communities with students who could really benefit from that mentoring. She's overseeing the National Honor Society students from the high school, going over to the middle school in the mornings to tutor students, including the superintendent's own son, who apparently is heading over there routinely now. And she's really been working with our schools to enhance and increase the amount of volunteerism that we're having in there. But one of the things that we're also doing is she's helping us really keep tabs of all of the volunteers, because as a school district, if we want to see volunteerism flourishing here, we want to be able to go back in and celebrate those volunteers at the end. So, we as a school district are now tracking that volunteerism on a much better level, and it positions us to really celebrate the volunteers on the other side of this. So that's sort of a little overview. And then one thing that's not on this list that probably should be, Joy played a huge role on the back end of developing the strategic plan. Not in the while she wasn't sitting in on the meetings for the strategic planning steering committee, but the community forum that we had and the planning that was involved in that was Joy on that end, and then communicating out and bringing the strategic plan, once the school committee approved it, out to the families. She had a big role in that happening. So we're getting a lot of bang for the buck on this, and seeing increasing volunteerism in the schools because of it. Another strategic initiative that we have been focusing on is making sure that we're expanding our differentiation in ELA at the elementary level, and there's some guiding reading resources that are really embedded in this budget. So there's $14,000 that's going towards Harwich Elementary, $7,950 in these reading materials going to Chatham Elementary. And then there are strategic improvements. So these are things that dovetail into that strategic plan that that we're putting in this budget. And I'll note here, there are things that that you'll see up there that we're adding staff, and we're adding staff, but we're on the other end having to reduce staff other places so that we reduce some areas so we can strategically enhance in others. One of the things that I know has gotten some people's attention is we have, as part of this budget, deliberately shifted from a focus during one of the special times at the elementary level from a Spanish instruction at the elementary level to embedding more science. So currently, as elementary students go to art and music and Spanish and library and technology, and I'm missing something. Gym. Gym. How could I miss gym? This would have Spanish be replaced with science. It's an even swap when it comes to staffing, but there are costs because at the moment, the elementary schools don't have science materials to work with. So there's $10,000 for Harwich Elementary, $5,850 for Chatham Elementary in that. And just to quickly clarify, I did say that there's technology. I just want to differentiate some of the differences between what might happen in terms of technology versus science and engineering, because when we talk, you hear the term STEM used a lot. So science, technology, engineering, and math. Math is a big part of what our elementary classrooms typically do. Technology has been a special, and technology at the elementary level, a lot of it early on is learning how to be comfortable with the computer and learning basic keyboarding skills. Keep in mind, by third grade, our elementary students have to start using the computer for MCAS state testing, so you have to develop some basic keyboarding skills and comfort level with the computers. The computers also are this wonderful tool to create and express yourself. I actually I got a appreciation of this when I was going to interview for this job, because I actually went to a Joseph Banks store with my two children at the time were elementary aged, and they got my iPhone to entertain them while their father was spending an hour and a half trying on different suits so I could come and look presentable for an interview. And when I finished, they had developed on my phone this full movie with subtext, like little text boxes and this and that and the other. They'd use the whole iMovie features on an iPhone. And I was sitting there going, this is like a 5th grader and a 3rd grader that's doing this. And I was just thinking, wow, it's like, imagine what they could do with that technology to really express themselves. And it's not something that's just needs to happen at a high school or might happen in middle school. And I would like to give just a shout out and an appreciation of what I see happening at Chatham Elementary School with Catherine Ware, the librarian and technology teacher, for those parents and community members who happen to go to Chatham Elementary School to see the State Fair project last year, and to see that they had dovetailed into reporting about Montana, a video, and there's all this sort of little movies and graphics, so that ability to manipulate graphics, use movies, what used to happen at the high school levels, rapidly finding its way all the way down into the elementary levels, and you're seeing these kids really, really flourish, with that technology. Another area where I see technology education heading quickly in our district, and it's something our society and economy need, is to see us embedding more and more, or introducing more and more coding or computer programming early on. So I see more and more of that happening in the technology piece of those specials, but none of that addresses the science piece of it. I think in a conversation I might have been having with Mary earlier today, she had done some sort of analysis at Harwich Elementary School, and thinks that maybe slightly under a half an hour a week is dedicated as science instruction at Harwich Elementary School. So if we can go and have more time allocated for science, thinking of science and engineering, because ultimately these students are going to be tested on this once they go into 5th grade on science and engineering for the MCAS, but to inspire them early on and get them excited about science and technology, and have them, or science and engineering, and have them understand more about their bodies, more about their environment, be stronger, stronger consumers of scientific information and technology information that they're going to be bombarded with throughout their lives, and really prepare them for what I see as sort of the areas in the economy that are ripe there. We talk about the blue economy for Cape Cod. That blue economy starts with understanding the science of our marine ecosystem that surrounds us. And then in Massachusetts, there's that high tech and engineering and all the biomedical stuff. But all of that happens by starting with science and science instruction. So enough about that, just to move on to the other things. Enhancements that we anticipate seeing at the middle school. Middle school is where we're seeing an increase in the number of students. So each one of our schools next year, except for the middle school, we anticipate a slight decline in enrollment. The middle school has the largest of our cohorts are currently coming up to the middle school, and will slowly over the next few years reach the high school, and we're going to see the high school numbers starting to increase. The middle school needs some clinical supports, so we're expanding a part-time clinical counselor to a full-time clinical counselor in this budget. The middle school, because of the increasing number, needs more special education support. So we see the special education being supported by expanding a part-time team chair to a full-time team chair. At the high school, and this again is something we've sort of emphasized in our strategic plan, we have a growing number of English language learners, students that don't speak English as their first language, learning how to, learning the English language while also having to learn math, English, history, science. All of that's happening, particularly at the high school. We have a number of students that are coming here as 8th, 9th, and 10th graders, learning to speak English at the same time while also needing to learn the curriculum so that they can pass MCAS exams so that they can graduate. So we are adding an English language learning teacher at the high school in this budget to help move along a lot of our school district's initiatives when it comes to differentiation, guided reading, social emotional development, multicultural awareness. We embed more professional development time for summer workshops in this. And again, looping back to the English language learners, we haven't been carrying in our budget a line item for translation services, but we need that. So there's $15,000 in this budget for translation and interpreter services to help us as a school district better communicate with the growing number of ELL families that we have. All right, I won't go through number by number, line by line, but when we have our March meeting and the school district votes the budget, the school district votes the budget by line. So the budget gets voted, and you can imagine that the FY20 draft budget line or column is what gets read off, line by line and voted. This is a $40,901,482 budget. There is a maintenance and technology budget in here. I think we have, Katie and I have been very cognizant as we develop this budget and past year's budgets to make sure that the investment that the taxpayers put into each one of their schools, including the high school, that we're maintaining them, both in terms of the physical facility, but also making sure that the networking in those buildings is one that will support a modern education. And I think we each year invite people to come tour the buildings before the start of the school year, because we're really proud of how we've been able to keep these buildings going. And I think in many ways that Harwich Elementary School, Chatham Elementary School, and the middle school are in better shape today than they were when the school district came together. So there's there are some parking lot repairs that we can imagine at the middle school. We continue to slowly replace carpeting in areas, and we'll be doing some roof repairs at the high school, repainting lines, doing some landscaping, and again, checking on the roof. We're in the final stages of improving the infrastructure at the middle school and high school, and we have the school committee approved a sort of updating some of the computers in the graphics and robotics labs in the past. We'll have to again update those it's sort of the new new iteration of that lease agreement. Chatham Elementary School, retiling a couple rooms, some roof repairs, replacing carpet at Harwich Elementary School, working on one of the rooftop units, and some of the last pieces of the network infrastructure. In terms of school funding and where it goes, the bulk of the costs to run a school are your employee costs, the instructional salaries and wages, the benefits, the custodian salaries and wages, the administrative salaries. All those are 69% of a school district's budgets, its wages. In terms of how that budget is funded, 84.9% of the budget comes from Harwich and Chatham taxpayers. 63% of the budget's coming from the Harwich assessment, almost 22% coming from that Chatham assessment. The next biggest source to fund the budget is Chapter 70 state aid, Given the wealth factors within our two towns, we only see 8.6% state aid, and in some poorer communities, you'll see that the percentage of that state aid relative to the rest of their budget being significantly larger. Annually, we go do a calculation, what does it cost each day to educate a Monomoy student? The number for this year, $123.32. By category, salaries and wages, it's $21.5 million in the budget, $5.2 million for other expenses. Fixed charges, 7.7, and then programs with other school districts. Think here of those. That's that charter school and school choice tuitions. That's a big chunk of money. That's $3.6 million of our budget flowing out to charter schools and other school districts. In terms of the percentages by category, salaries and wages, again, being that that biggest piece. How this budget goes up over prior years, this is a 3% increase over FY19. And as I mentioned, there's a uniqueness to this budget with a few additional out-of-district students with expensive tuitions. That one line goes up unavoidably by $432,000. If that line, weren't going up, this is really a 1.96% increase. It's okay. So while this is a $40.9 million budget, it doesn't mean that that's what this is going to cost the town. So this is how we shift from budget to assessment. So what does it cost to run the school district when it comes to the two towns? So we take the budget here and subtract from that budget the state aid that's coming in. We've got the state aid that's coming in, and then we have this amount of money that's called the required minimum contribution. There's a significant shift in that required minimum contribution from this year to last year, and it's largely driven by enrollment. So the foundation enrollment in Chatham has dropped off by, I think it was about 11 children. The foundation enrollment in Harwich for this year, based on October 1 of this school year, went up by, I think it was 34 students. So that swing in students was quite appreciable, and is largely behind this change in minimum required contribution. I think I mentioned that minimum required contribution also takes into account wealth factors. But both towns, according to the state's Department of Revenue, experienced growth in their revenues over 4%. So both towns were growing at fairly similar amounts in terms of their wealth, but largely driven by a foundation enrollment shift in this fiscal year. You see Harwich is going up, Chatham's coming down slightly. So ultimately, we give to both towns' finance directors and town managers a draft assessment that starts up top with that $40.9 million budget number, and then slowly but surely it gets down to how much is the assessment, the bill for each town. So you take off of that $40.9 million the cost of state aid, of excess and deficiency, of charter school reimbursement. This isn't charter school cost, it's the amount of money that the state reimburses school districts for some of their charter school costs. Money that we get for Medicaid, interest that we earn on some of our monies, miscellaneous revenues that could be everything from gate receipts to this, that, and the other. So just miscellaneous revenues come in there. We break out that budget then, or the remaining money, based on how much we're going to have in the budget for transportation, capital, and debt, because those each get assessed per the regional agreement differently. So those come out, and you come up with this 32.573270 is the operating assessment. That operating assessment then has the minimum required contribution from each town is taken out of that operating assessment. So Harwich, using the number provided by the state, Chatham, using the number provided by the state this year, is pulled out of there. The remainder is then multiplied by the 3-year rolling average. That's that 73.45% for Harwich, 26.55% for Chatham. Gives you the assessment, the operating assessment for each town. Then we do the same thing for transportation assessment, but you'll notice that the percentage is different. And the difference is operating assessment is based on foundation enrollment, because in that operating assessment is the cost for kids that are going to charter schools, is the cost for kids that are going to NOSIT or to DY through school choice. In the transportation ratio per the regional agreement, that's children from Chatham and Harwich that have seats on a bus and seats here in our schools. So this is the ratio of Harwich to Chatham kids in the buildings, which is why it's slightly different than the other one. But transportation then gets broken out for each member town. Debt has the same ratios in the regional agreement as the operating. So you'll see the cost for debt service broken out there, including note that last line under debts, that State House note for this year. And then the last piece being capital and stabilization costs. So we have behind this $305,000 for capital and $50,000 for stabilization, just like in last year's budget. So under that, the FY20 draft assessment would find Harwich paying $26,754,276 to operate Monomoy, Chatham paying $178,025 to operate Monomoy. We have up there just while we talk about this is a all-in, including out of districts, a 3% budget increase. At the end of the day, when we talk to select boards and we talk to finance committees, they want to know, well, how much does it cost? How much does the cost increase this year compared to last year? And that's where the assessment piece comes in. So the assessment for Harwich goes up by 4.47%. Chatham's actually goes down. It's a negative 0.35%. Again, largely driven by that swing in minimum required contribution. You'll notice that the total assessment increase for the two towns is 3.19%. The reason that's over 3, as I said, the budget goes up by 3%, but that goes up by a little bit more. On the second line up here, excess and deficiency. In this, remember, we're using $550,000 of excess and deficiency. Last year, we used out of the district's reserve $705,000. So by using less excess and deficiency up front in the assessment calculation, it causes you're using less reserves, so the towns are having to go and pay more, and emphasizing that we can't continue to go and use $705,000 of excess and deficiency, or there'll be no reserves, and then we'll have a budget cycle where we're coming to the towns with the percent increase going up hugely in 1 year, and ideally you're using that excess and deficiency to try to smooth out years. this year, remember, we're doing two things to try to smooth this budget, because we've got a challenge. We have this out-of-district increase that's coming in, that's rather significant. So we're trying to smooth that with a thoughtful look at our program and where can we reduce and still maintain that level service. But we also do use some of the reserves in the funding of the budget. So I provide this, I just provide these as just sort of an FYI at the end to help everyone understand the advanced calculus that's required when trying to figure out what is the minimum required contribution. See, so when the minimum required contributions shifts, $600 some odd thousand towards Harwich, or negative towards Chatham, it's not the superintendent or the business manager at Monomoy making some sort of mistake. It comes out of a formula that the state uses as part of their Chapter 70 determination. So on the sheet here, it lists for Chatham what their minimum required contribution is, and it lists on the sheet, this minimum required contribution is the line, line 19 up there, and you'll notice it's $4,274,005. That is how much it is for Monomoy, plus how much it is for their minimum required contribution to run Cape Tech, which gives the town of Chatham a separate assessment, so it's its own regional school district. On the other hand, for Harwich, again, that the minimum required contribution for Harwich shows up on line 25 and again, that number is the minimum required contribution to run the school district, Monomoy, but also to run Cape Tech. So that's the budget presentation from one end to the other for those that are still awake.
Thank you, Dr. Carpenter.
Questions if you want.
Any comments, questions? Thank you.
Oh.
I don't have questions on the numbers. I think that you presented the numbers very clearly, and as much clarity as we can, at least I can get. But a couple minor things, I just wasn't sure what they were. For instance, the middle school where you talked about a clinical counselor. In certification terms, is that, do you mean?
Adjustment counselor.
Adjustment counselor, okay. That I understand. The other thing is that on the very beginning, it might have a difference in view on something, and that is page 2, where it says, let's see if I can get page 2. Reduce staff budget without reduction in services or programs. I'd cut that out.
Well,
I don't
I
think
also
that's-
call that my oxymoron on some level, but I, again, if I go back to sort of my preamble to the budget conversation, I can imagine that if I went to the finance committees in either one of our towns and said, I've had 50 student reduction or 100 student reduction, and I'm not sitting there and saying, hey, we keep reducing a staff person or a staff person, I think people are going to start to say, well, why, why if you have fewer students, are you carrying the same number of staff? And I think there was something I saw in a newspaper article where Mr. Sherry in Harwich was, sort of, commenting, if there's fewer students, should there be fewer teachers? And I think a misconception out there is that, that a reduced staff budget is the superintendent trying to scare people. I'm not trying to scare people with this. This is a solid educational program on the other side of this. This is just the superintendent trying to address one of the realities we have in our towns. There's just fewer kids. And at some point, there become enough fewer kids that you contract a classroom here and a classroom there. And that's what we've seen happen at Chatham Elementary School for the last 2 years. And this year, we did some soul searching on, I know Mary came to me saying at the beginning of the year, I think we probably only need 5 sections at kindergarten. And I'm like, well, let's see how next year's cohort goes. And it's, so we think that we're gonna need 5 sections at kindergarten at Harwich Elementary School this next year. And on many levels, I would love to see suddenly this cohort of 45 kids showing up at the doorstep at Chatham Elementary, or a bumper crop at Harwich Elementary, where we're saying, it's time to reopen a kindergarten. But we're not there, and the demographics for the for our region of Massachusetts don't show that that's going to be happening in the near future.
That isn't what I meant. I think if it just said reduce staff budget, with keeping a good school, but I just don't think it's accurate saying without reduction in services or programs, that's all.
I can trim it. That's,
Okay.
Okay.
but I think there have been past years, and what I want to be sensitive to, there have been past years where, if I look back 4 years ago, there was the potential that we were going to have to trim a whole bunch of staff, and there was going to be program that was going to get cut. And I came here to this board and said, if I have to cut by this amount, here's what is going to be lost. We're not seeing something that's lost. There is a curricular shift in this. We do go from Spanish to science at the elementary school, but we're reducing to add. We're not saying, okay, there's not going to be a football team, or there's not going to be this class or that class within the high school or middle school. So all the clubs, all the activities are still there.
Tina?
Yeah, I had a question, page 37. Programs with other school districts. Did I understand you to say that, there's a big $400,000 jump? Did I understand you to say that was related to charter schools? Page 37, programs
So,
with
yeah,
other
that's,
schools?
that jump, that's the out of district.
Okay, all right.
Students,
Thank you.
so they're included in that number.
Okay,
So
And
that's-
charter schools and,
So it's charter
Okay.
schools, it's school
All right.
choice,
Okay.
and it has the out of district number in there too.
okay, that's helpful. And then with the 58 students that have decreased, is there any data related? I'm kind of curious as to why 58 students over the last, 3 years? Is there any data related to that at all?
So one thing to emphasize and clarify, make sure I get to the right slide here. It's not, the decrease is not that they're going someplace else.
Okay.
So this slide would have, we're seeing a decline in kids going out to other school districts, a decline in kids going to charter schools. We're seeing an increase of kids from other school districts coming to us, and still there's a decline in enrollment in Monomoy. And that's just,
Okay.
yeah, we need to have more snowstorms with power outages and,
Whoa.
people trying to keep warm.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Okay.
Or more affordable housing so people can live in the town of Chatham.
That too.
Right.
Options.
But I think there are all sorts, there are all sorts of conversations that are happening, regionally. Chatham has a big push for Chatham 365, and just how to find ways to make our two towns affordable. We also have, as everybody knows, More and more of the affordable houses in our two towns get snapped up and become short-term rentals, which don't find year-round families in them. And, you know, so we have a lot of different variables that are impacting how many households we have in our two communities with families in them.
Okay,
Um,
thank you very much. Oh,
Just to follow up on what Tina said on the 58, I guess it was, could we get a breakdown sometime between now and before we have the next meeting? Just to see, like, is it all that they're not coming into kindergarten, or are they, you know, moving out at all kinds of different grade levels somewhere else?
So, well, I think if it's not that they're moving out anywhere. That's what this
No, I
gets
mean, like,
at the moving out.
Out of
They're-
state or somewhere away, not going to other schools.
I have it broken down that tight.
Yeah,
But we could.
I guess I don't know where, I don't know how to answer, you know, sort of where children that aren't in our towns, like, I think it really gets into, you know, the dynamics on affordability in our two towns, not.
I'm just looking at, like, a year ago in grades, if you combine Chatham and Harwich Elementary, in grades 1 and 2 and 3 and so forth, up through grade 12, if there's at any particular grade level moving, or if it, I mean, logically, we would think that maybe they're just not here at kindergarten.
Yeah, that's actually what we're seeing, and that's why you'll notice when I went into this presentation, the contractions happening at the elementary level. It's, you know, so it's that elementary age child is becoming more and more rare in the two towns.
So
You know, more so in Chatham than in Harwich, but we're seeing, you know, we're seeing those populations decline, which is why, we once easily were able to go and fill 6 kindergarten classrooms at Harwich Elementary School, largely with Harwich Elementary children. When we first fully regionalized the school district, because I, as a superintendent, was encouraging school choice families head over to Chatham Elementary School, and so Harwich Elementary was having fewer and fewer school choice kids, and it was just Harwich kids there, and that number, we're not seeing that same number of Harwich students year after year after year.
Because that would give our towns data on if they're moving out or not coming in at kindergarten. We're losing a certain age group of people, whereas if we were losing them at high school or something, the parental age group and employment would be a different group of people generally.
I think the way to look at it is, I think families, when they come here, we're not losing them. I think it's just,
We're not attracting them.
it's how do you attract them on the front end so that this is where they say, so it's not like we're seeing middle school families moving out. I think it's just that initial, and that's why you're seeing the phenomena show up at the elementary schools.
Mm-hmm.
But you can play this forward, so we're going to see a big bumper crop of kids that's currently at the middle school is going to come up to the high school. But if the demographics continue, our elementary schools are going to stay relatively small, and you go 10 years out into the future, we're going to see a lot fewer students at Monomoy. And again, I suspect that there'll be some in the community who say, okay, there are fewer students, are you thoughtfully contracting or not?
So it will be interesting how Chatham's plan for preschool will affect people staying here
Yeah,
or
I
wanting to
personally
be
am
here.
a big proponent of
Yeah,
looking
I
at
like that.
ways to help young families with preschool.
Just one other question. On my visits out to the schools, I know, I'm curious about the efforts that are being made to maintain students that are going to the charter schools. And I was, talking to a couple of the principals, and I know that there are follow-up calls and being made and everything, but I'm just kind of curious, is that data collected? Is there a log somewhere? If somebody is throwing their name into the lottery at Sturgis or Lighthouse, and they decide to go, I'm curious about what the reasons are.
So, I think there are a lot of different, there are a lot of different reasons, but I think the simplest one, it tends to be perceptions on academics. And when I came here, one of the voices that I reached out to was a former Nauset superintendent and served a while at Chatham, Mike Redome, and was just wanting to pick Mike's brain on how did he change the dynamic, because Lighthouse Charter used to be in their backyard, and Mike's like, you improve the educational program, they'll stay with you, and Nauset bumped up their educational program, really focused at the middle school, and Lighthouse decided they were going to move to Harwich. And on my end, it's let's make sure that we've got the strongest middle school on Cape Cod. By the way, we do. It's something we shared early in the year. And I think families are going to start to look at, hey, if I want to give my child the best educational options, it's a bigger school, we've got more options, and I want to give them the best education, stay at Monomoy. And that's what we're seeing more and more with families.
Okay, last call.
Yeah, you've got it.
Thanks again. Okay, this next thing is this subcommittee reports, negotiation subcommittee?
Yes, on behalf of the negotiations subcommittee, I would like to announce, which Dr. Carpenter stole my thunder, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
But we do have a tentative agreement with the Unit B, which are the teaching assistants and the administrative assistants. And they, along with the Unit A teachers, are hopefully going to be looking to ratify that contract in the next couple of weeks, hopefully before our next meeting. So again, we can share those details, but I'd like to also thank the Unit B negotiation team for working with us, and it was just lovely, so.
All right.
Anticlimactic for me to say all that since he took my thunder.
Thank you. And then the policy subcommittee, second reading for file JH, student absences and excuses.
All right, so I read that last time, so I'd like to just make a motion to accept the policies, the three policies, file JH, student absences and excuses, file JIE, pregnant students, and file JIMG, animals in school, as amended.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Might want to take a drink of water, Scott. It's time for the superintendent's report.
I think people have heard me talk enough. I just have two quick things that are in your packets. The first is there is a memo from Liz Argo, who has come here to speak with us in the past from the Cape Vineyards Electric Cooperative. They are announcing that they're seeking entities to get involved with them for a solar project, and we as a school district are interested in moving forward with them to look at solar now for the high school roof. When the high school was built, it was built solar ready, so it was built to accommodate panels. We were just waiting for the right time and to make sure all the roof issues were taken care of before we mounted any solar panels on it during the construction project. So, that's just an FYI on a direction that that we'll be heading and that you'll hear more from as we move forward. I also have a copy of a intermunicipal agreement in your packet between the school district and the town of Harwich with regard to field maintenance here at the high school. One of the things that had happened at Harwich High School long before we came together is Harwich High School had, as I understand, although I never saw it myself because it didn't exist by the time I came here, Harwich had this most immaculate field hockey field. And it was in this immaculate state because it was cared for and tended to by the grounds crew at Cranberry Valley. And when we built the current high school, apparently it is sitting on what once was that beautiful field. And I had many members of the community were trying to emphasize that I needed to make sure that at some point we would have those same vibrant, lush fields to play field hockey and other sports on. And when we went into the construction project, the front lawns weren't coming along very well. And with the landscape contractor and we finally worked with the contractor for the overall building and said, look, we'd really like to engage with Cranberry Valley to have them come over and get our front fields up in shape. And Sean Hernandez, who is the superintendent at Cranberry Valley, has done a fantastic job over the last 2 years of getting our front fields so that we have some of the nicest regular grass fields. It's fine, I was about to say turf, but these days turf is artificial turf, but we have some of the finest grass fields around to play on, and it's making it so that this is a destination where different soccer and lacrosse tournaments want to come here to Monomoy, play on our fields because of what we have to offer as a school, and hopefully have families start looking at our town as this is a place to be and our school is a place to attend. So in this, I sat down a couple days ago with Chris Clark, the town manager, our facilities director, Rick Travers, and Sean Hernandez, the superintendent at Cranberry Valley, and we have a new intermunicipal agreement to take care of the fields. The only cost difference for the agreement is it just goes up by 2% on their personnel costs, which is what the town's personnel costs are going up. But anyway, I would strongly recommend that the school committee engage in this agreement with the select board in Harwich. Ultimately, it's an agreement between this group and the town.
Yes, Sharon?
I have a question, but I don't know how to pronounce the word. There's a group coming around asking all the towns to voluntarily not use some geochemical that has to do with pesticide getting in the water. Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, well, anyway, they're coming around to all the Cape towns and asking it to be put on the ballot, I think, for us to voluntarily do it for, not in your personal yard, but for the towns. And I think several towns have already gone with that. So could we just find out, we might not be able to do it on the field, but maybe the surrounding areas. I'm not that knowledgeable about it.
There are a lot of standards that have to be used on schools, fields anyway, and Sean's well aware of what has to happen as our the folks from Chatham that take care of the fields at the middle school. So, but I can have our facilities director reach out and.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because it's going to be, I think it's going to go to the selectmen's meeting, all of the selectmen's meeting. Oh, it has. Okay, so I'm not sure if it's come to Harwich yet or not.
I think it has.
Oh, you think it has? Okay.
Okay, That's it. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session pursuant to MGL 30A, Section 21, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining union and non-union contracts coming out for adjournment only.
So moved.
Second?
Just a comment, Madam Chair, the intermunicipal agreement, does that need a vote, Scott?
I would say ultimately it does. What I don't see on here that I can provide is just the financial sheet. But I think it could wait till our next meeting. Think of it, this is, when we discuss, presentation and vote the next, I think if we vote at our next meeting, that'd be fine.
Thank you, Terry.
Roll call. Aye.
Oh, roll call.
Aye.
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 Did Jen vote yes or no? Thank you.
So you can say we're adjourned.
Oh,
Or not.
Yes, yes, I knew
And
it was in there.
we have implemented a ban on all municipal town property of this product. We didn't use a lot of it anyway, we
Yeah.
really didn't. It was a lot of flower beds that were done, but we don't use a lot of it in town anyway.
Great.
We banned it on the golf course, we banned it
I
on
mean,
the, yeah.
we're surrounded by water.
We've banned it.
I want a personal opinion on something totally unrelated though.
The same symptom they get all the problem on social media. When it comes to the meat and potatoes, it's a non-shop. Like, everything has been pitchforking and raised to all of us. I'm here on the left, right in the middle of the meat and potatoes. You know, the wild duck. She doesn't want to.
yeah, I know who you mean.
Calm, cool, collective, intelligent discussion. She wants to get